I thought being old meant being invisible. Turns out it just meant people thought they could move me out of the way. They were wrong. Hi. My name is Eleanor Ellie Brooks, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived long enough to know when a room goes quiet because people are afraid, and when it goes quiet because they think you're already gone. This is what happened when my own family decided I was easier to manage if I wasn't home anymore. I'll start here because this is where it really began. The first time my daughter suggested extra help, she said it lightly, like she was offering me a cup of tea. We were standing in my kitchen, the one with the yellow linoleum floors I scrubbed on my knees back, when my husband was still alive and the kids tracked mud in without a second thought. She didn't look at me when she said it. She stared at the mail on the counter instead, fingers tapping the corner of an envelope addressed to me. "Mom," she said, smiling in that tight way she gets when she's already decided something. "Have you ever thought about simplifying things?" I remember laughing. Actually laughing, because the idea was ridiculous. This house was my life. I'd lived here 46 years. I knew every creak in the floorboards, every window that stuck in the winter, every shadow that moved across the living room wall when the oak tree outside swayed in the wind. Simplifying didn't mean leaving. It meant letting go of junk drawers and old sweaters. It didn't mean erasing myself. "I'm doing just fine," I told her. I patted the counter to steady myself, not because I needed it, but because she was watching me like she was waiting for me to wobble. "I still drive. I still cook. I still beat you at cards." She smiled wider then. Too wide. "Of course you do." That should have been my first warning. Over the next few weeks, the concern ramped up. Calls instead of visits. Questions instead of conversations. "Did you eat today? Are you feeling dizzy? Did you remember your pills?" I started to feel like I was being interviewed for a role I didn't want. Sometimes I'd catch my son-in-law glancing around the house, eyes lingering on the hardwood floors, the fireplace, the framed photos lining the hallway. He'd nod slowly, like he was taking inventory. One afternoon, I overheard them whispering in the living room. I was in the bathroom, door cracked, and I froze when I heard my name. "She's getting worse," my daughter said. "She seems fine to me," my son-in-law replied, but there was hesitation there, the kind that can be pushed. "She left the stove on last week." "I boiled water," I said out loud before I even realized I was speaking. My voice carried down the hall, sharp and clear, and I turned it off. They both jumped when I stepped into the doorway. My daughter's hand flew to her chest like she'd been caught doing something shameful, which of course she had. "Oh, Mom," she said, laughing nervously. "We didn't hear you." "I did," I replied, and I didn't smile. From then on, the house felt different, not unsafe, watched. The day they brought the papers, it was raining. One of those slow, steady rains that soaks into everything and makes the world feel heavy. My daughter set a folder down on the dining table, right next to the place where my husband used to sit. I noticed that. I always notice things like that. "This is just precautionary," she said, sliding the papers toward me. "Temporary, just until you're stronger." I picked them up. My hands didn't shake. Inside were documents I didn't fully recognize at first. Medical evaluations, legal language, signatures I hadn't signed. Assisted living. Power of attorney. Care management. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You want me to leave my house?" I said slowly. "No," she rushed to say. "Just step away for a bit. Let professionals help. You deserve rest." Rest. Like I'd been working myself to death by existing. "And the house?" I asked. My son-in-law cleared his throat. "It'll be easier if it's managed while you're gone." Managed. Another word that sounded harmless until you felt the teeth in it. I looked at my daughter then, really looked at her, at the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, at the way her fingers fidgeted with her wedding ring. "You're planning something," I said. She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "Mom, Please don't make this harder than it has to be. That was the moment I understood. Not fully, not all at once, but enough. They weren't worried about me falling. They were worried about waiting. The next week passed in a blur. Doctor appointments I didn't ask for. A social worker who smiled too much and spoke too slowly. A man in a grey suit who introduced himself as just here to help everyone feel comfortable. I kept saying no. They kept saying later. Then one morning, a car showed up. I hadn't packed a bag. I hadn't agreed. But my daughter stood in my doorway with my coat folded over her arm, tears already lined up in her eyes like props waiting for a cue. Just try it, she whispered. For me. I remember looking back at my living room before I left. The couch with the faded arm where my husband used to nap. The lamp I'd rewired myself after he passed. The faint smell of lemon cleaner still hanging in the air. I had the strangest thought then. If I walked out, would I be allowed to walk back in? The facility was clean. Too clean. Everything beige and soft and quiet, like it was designed to swallow sound. And people with equal efficiency. The staff spoke in gentle tones. The residents stared or slept or wandered aimlessly down the halls. My room had a bed, a dresser, and a window that didn't open all the way. Temporary, I told myself. The first night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the building. Somewhere down the hall, someone cried. Somewhere else, a television murmured to no one. I pressed my palm against my chest and breathed until the panic settled. The next morning, I asked for my paperwork. The nurse blinked. What paperwork, dear? The ones my family signed, I said. I'd like copies. She smiled, the way they all do when they think you're confused. I'll check. She didn't come back. Days passed, then weeks. My daughter visited less. When she did, she brought updates instead of warmth. We're repainting the living room. The realtor says the market is good right now. Wouldn't it be easier if everything was handled? Handled. One afternoon she mentioned it casually, like she was commenting on the weather. We had to move some things out of the house, she said. Just to stage it. I felt my heart stutter. Stage it? I repeated. For sale, she said, finally meeting my eyes. Mum, it's for the best. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I smiled, because in that moment, something inside me snapped into place. They thought I was done. They thought I was parked somewhere quiet, waiting to fade. They didn't know what I still had. And they had no idea what I was about to take back. I sat on my bed that night, staring at the sliver of moonlight on the floor, and made myself a promise. They put me in a home to take my house. I wasn't going to let them keep either. I learned quickly that places like that run on routine, and routine makes people careless. Every morning at exactly 7, the lights flicked on in the hallway. At 7:15, the carts rolled by with pills rattling in little plastic cups. At 8, breakfast, rubbery eggs, toast you could bend without breaking, coffee that smelled stronger than it tasted. The staff rotated, but the rhythm never changed. And once you understand the rhythm, you can move between the beats without anyone noticing. At first, I did what they expected. I ate. I nodded. I thanked people. I let them guide me by the elbow like I might tip over if left unattended. I asked simple questions, harmless ones. How long have you worked here? Do you like it? What day is trash pickup again? They relaxed around me. You could feel it. Their voices lost that careful edge, the one people use when they think you're fragile. I became Sweet Ellie. Cooperative, easy, invisible. My daughter liked this version of me. She visited more when she thought I'd settled in. She sat on the edge of my bed and talked about paint colors and open concepts, like she wasn't describing the slow erasure of my life. We found a buyer who really loves the neighborhood, she said one afternoon, smoothing her coat like she was nervous. A young couple, first home. I pictured strangers walking through my living room, touching my walls, commenting on the light. I imagined them opening drawers, closets, the little hall cabinet where I kept birthday cards and old keys I never threw away. "And my things?" I asked quietly. She waved a hand. "Most of it went to storage. Some donations. You don't need all that stuff anymore, Mom." Need. That word again. I smiled at her. I practiced that smile in the mirror afterward. The one that says, "I trust you," while everything inside you sharpens. After she left, I went to the activity room. There was a computer there, shoved into the corner like an afterthought. Most residents didn't use it. Too complicated, the staff said. Too confusing. I sat down anyway. The first time, my hands hovered over the keyboard longer than I'd like to admit. It had been years since I'd done anything more complicated than email. But muscle memory is a funny thing. It waits patiently. I started small. I searched my own name. Nothing alarming at first. Then I searched the address. That's when I felt it. The rush of heat behind my eyes, the pressure in my ears. My house was listed. Not coming soon. Not preparing. Listed. Photos and all. They'd staged it beautifully. Neutral furniture. Soft lighting. Not a trace of me. No scuffed chair legs. No quilt folded over the arm of the couch. They'd erased 46 years in a weekend. I clicked deeper, heart pounding, fingers steady. Owner, Eleanor Brooks. Still mine. That was the first crack in their plan. The next day, I asked the nurse for my file again. She gave me that look, the one that says "here we go." But this time, I didn't back down. "I want copies of every document with my name on it," I said. "It's my right." She hesitated. I waited. Silence is powerful when you let it stretch. "I'll have to ask administration," she said. "Please do," I replied. "I'll wait." It took 3 days, but eventually a thin folder appeared at the foot of my bed. Not everything, but enough. Power of attorney, limited, medical decisions only. Temporary. There it was, clear as day. They couldn't sell my house without me, unless I was declared unfit. That explained the sudden urgency, the evaluations, the whispers. I felt something close to laughter bubble up in my chest. They'd rushed. They'd assumed. Big mistake. I started asking more pointed questions after that. Casually, over lunch, during walks in the courtyard. What would happen if I wanted to leave? I asked a staff member one day, watching her face carefully. She blinked. Leave? Like, permanently? Just curious. "Well," she said slowly, "if you're here voluntarily, you can discharge yourself. But families usually—" "I'm here voluntarily," I said. She nodded, uncertain. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about my husband, about how he used to say, "Never show your cards until the hand is almost over." He'd been a quiet man, observant. People underestimated him too. I slept better than I had in weeks. My daughter called the next morning, frantic. "The realtor says there's an issue," she said. "Something about paperwork." I let a pause stretch between us. "Oh," I said lightly. "Did you sign something?" Her voice wavered. "No," I replied. "I didn't." Silence. Then sharper, colder. "Mom, don't do this." "Do what?" "Complicate things." There it was again, as if my existence were an inconvenience. "You should come visit," I said. "We should talk." She came the next day, jaw tight, eyes darting around my room like she expected hidden cameras. "You need to cooperate," she hissed once the door closed. "This is for your own good." "For whose good?" I asked. She looked away. That was answer enough. "I know about the listing," I continued. "I know you can't sell without me." Her face drained of color. "You don't understand how this works." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You thought if I stayed here long enough, someone would decide I wasn't capable. Then you could do whatever you wanted." She opened her mouth, closed it. I raised you better than this, I said softly. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't move me anymore. I'd cried enough on my own time. You're being selfish, she snapped. We need that money. Need. There it was again. I leaned back against my pillows, suddenly very tired and very clear. You should go, I said. I have things to do. She left in a fury, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I sat there afterward, hands folded, heart steady. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't trapped. I was underestimated. And now that I knew exactly how far they were willing to go, I was done playing quiet. The moment you decide to stop begging for fairness is the moment the ground shifts under everyone else's feet. I didn't announce anything. I didn't threaten. I didn't warn. I planned. The first thing I did was ask for a social worker meeting, not in a panic, not tearfully, calm, polite, persistent. The kind of request that makes people assume you're finally accepting reality. When the social worker arrived, she brought a clipboard and that practiced look of sympathy that never quite reaches the eyes. She sat across from me, legs crossed, pen poised. How are you adjusting, Eleanor? She asked. Very well, I said. I've had time to think. She smiled. That's good. I'd like to review the terms of my stay, I continued, specifically my admission status. She hesitated, just a flicker. According to my understanding, I said, folding my hands in my lap, I'm here voluntarily. She nodded slowly. Yes. And there is no court order declaring me incompetent. Another pause, longer this time. No, she said carefully. There isn't. Good, I replied. Then I'd like to begin the discharge process. The pen froze midair. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. I saw the recalculation behind her eyes. Families usually prefer, she began. I am the family, I said. And I prefer to go home. Home. The word felt dangerous and powerful at the same time. She told me there would be evaluations, forms, waiting periods. I nodded through all of it. I had patience. I'd been patient my whole life. That afternoon, I made another request. I asked for access to a phone. Not my daughter's number, not my son-in-law's. I called a lawyer. His name was Thomas Greer, and he'd handled my husband's will years ago. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. When he answered, there was a pause, then recognition. Eleanor Brooks, he said. I was wondering when I'd hear from you again. I told him everything. I didn't cry. I didn't dramatize. I laid it out piece by piece, like evidence on a table. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. They listed your house without authorization, he said finally. That alone is a problem. They moved my belongings, I added. Some of them are gone. That's another problem. And they're trying to keep me here, I said, my voice steady. So they can finish what they started. His tone shifted then, sharpened. Eleanor, he said, do not sign anything. Do not agree to any new evaluations without me present. I'll be there tomorrow. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in months. That night, I packed. Not clothes, not toiletries. I packed my dignity. The next morning, my daughter showed up unannounced. I could hear her before I saw her, heels clicking too fast down the hall, voice tight with irritation as she spoke to the nurse. She burst into my room like a storm. What did you do? She demanded. I had a conversation, I said. You called a lawyer, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. Is that a problem? Her hands were shaking now. You're making this ugly. No, I replied. You did that when you tried to steal from me. Her face hardened. We're your children. And I'm your mother, I said quietly. Not your asset. She laughed then. A short, brittle sound. You think you can just walk out of here? Yes, I said. I do. She leaned in close, lowering her voice. No one will believe you. You're old. You're confused. You're already here. That was the moment. The exact moment something in me went still. You should be very careful, I told her, just as softly. Because if you push this any further, what comes next will be public. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. I've lived 72 years, I said. I buried my husband. I survived things you don't even know about. I have nothing left to protect but the truth. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. When Thomas arrived later that day, everything changed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten lawsuits right away. He asked questions, precise ones, the kind that leave paper trails and sleepless nights. By evening, the tone of the staff had shifted. Politeness turned crisp. Smiles tightened. By the next morning, the listing was gone. Withdrawn. No explanation. My daughter stopped calling. 2 days later, the administrator sat across from me, hands folded, expression stiff. We believe it would be best, she said, if you return to your residence. I almost laughed. Almost. Good, I said. I'll need my discharge papers. When the doors opened and I stepped outside, the air felt different, sharper, real. My house looked smaller than I remembered when I pulled into the driveway. Quieter. But it was still standing, still mine. Inside, there were gaps where my things had been, bare spots on the walls, dust where furniture used to be. But the bones were the same. I walked through every room slowly, touching the door frames, the counters, the windows, reclaiming them. On the kitchen counter, I found an envelope. Inside was a copy of the deed. My name on it. Only my name. They had underestimated me. And they were about to learn what that cost. The strange thing about getting your life back is realizing how much quieter it becomes once the fight is over. For the first few days after I returned home, I slept with the lights on. Not because I was afraid, but because I could. Because no one could tell me when to wake up or when to close my eyes. The hum of the refrigerator replaced the distant beeping of monitors. The floorboards creaked the way they always had, familiar and honest. I walked through the house slowly, room by room, letting the silence settle. The walls still remembered me, even if some of my belongings didn't. There were empty hooks where coats once hung, bare patches where framed photos used to be. It felt like walking through a version of myself that had been partially erased, but not destroyed. I made coffee the first morning back. Real coffee, strong enough to bite. I sat at my kitchen table and drank it without rushing, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. I kept waiting for the anger to return in a rush, for the grief to knock me flat. Instead, what I felt was clarity. Thomas came by that afternoon. He stood in my living room, hands in his pockets, looking around with quiet respect. They took liberties, he said, legally and morally. I know, I replied. We can pursue this, he continued. Elder exploitation, fraud, emotional coercion. I thought about my daughter, about the way she used to fall asleep on my chest when she was small, about how proud I'd been when she bought her first car, landed her first job. And then I thought about her voice in that facility room. No one will believe you. I don't want revenge, I said finally. Thomas nodded. You want justice. I want boundaries, I corrected. And I want the truth documented. So we did exactly that. The paperwork moved quietly but thoroughly. Storage receipts revealed missing items that had never been donated. Emails surfaced between my daughter and the realtor, dated before my move. Recommendations for capacity evaluations that had been requested without medical cause. Nothing dramatic at first, just facts. Facts have weight. The formal letter arrived at my daughter's house 2 weeks later. I didn't deliver it myself. I didn't need to. It outlined consequences, not threats. Conditions, not ultimatums. She showed up on my doorstep 3 days after that. She looked smaller somehow. Tired. Older. I didn't think it would go this far, she said, standing on the porch like a guest who didn't know if she'd be invited in. I did, I replied. We stood there for a long moment. The wind moved through the oak tree, rattling its branches softly, the same sound it had made the day I left for the facility. I was scared, she said finally. About money. About losing everything. You almost lost me, I said. That landed. Her eyes filled, but this time, I didn't rush to comfort her. I let the silence do its work. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said at last. But things will be different now. She nodded, slowly, like someone learning a new rule. She didn't come inside. After she left, I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it, breathing in the smell of old wood and lemon cleaner. I felt something close, not to triumph, but to peace. A week later, I went to the courthouse. I signed new documents, updated ones, clear ones. I placed my house in a trust with my name as the living authority. Conditions spelled out in ink so plain there could be no confusion. I arranged my affairs the way I wanted them arranged, not the way someone else decided was convenient. When I walked out, the deed was in my purse, still warm from my hand. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun went down, watching shadows stretch across the yard. Neighbors waved. One stopped to chat. Life, it turned out, had been waiting patiently for me to return. I thought about the woman I'd been when they put me in that home, confused, hurt, doubting herself. I wasn't her anymore. They had tried to move me aside, to soften me into silence, to take what I'd built while I was still breathing. Instead, I walked out with the deed. And something else too. My voice. My boundaries. My future. Old doesn't mean finished. It doesn't mean fragile. And it certainly doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes it just means you've learned exactly when to stop asking for permission